Right. Go on. Have a good time.
All right. Hello, everyone. People are ready to go, jumping in through the virtual doors. My name is Alberto Carbo, the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism. We've got a great class for you tonight. And tonight's Herbs A to Z is the rose family. And we've got peach, rose, of course, hawthorn, lady's mantle, and meadowsweet. And who better to tell us about these wonderful herbs than Phyllis and Matthew themselves? Of course, before we get into the webinar, I will bring you to the homepage and show you around real quick, especially for those of you that are catching this live on YouTube. You will find a link in the description below where you can go to the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism.com and find out all about Herbs A to Z if you are not familiar with it. We are on the homepage, but in order to find Herbs A to Z, you'll want to go to all courses. And that will open up this window here, and you'll want to look for this icon here, Herbs A to Z. If you do not see it in the front page, then just type in A to Z and hit enter. It will come up. And then click on the icon and open up the Herbs A to Z course page. Of course, take your time to read about the class and get an idea of what's included. But you do get a one live class per month, which is tonight's class. And then you get access to the entire archive of Herbs A to Z. It is the longest standing course at the Institute. And the best way to get a really good idea of what you get is going down to the curriculum and make sure you click on show more. There are over 70 different classes. These are all listed down here. So take your time to go through them. As you can see, there are so many different topics on an incredible amount of herbs, but also vitalist terms and holistic terms that Matthew has helped to bring back into the herbalism realm. And of course, specific topics such as the immune system or herbal first aid, the thermoregulatory system, some really interesting topics like holly and bat medicine. So you've got some animal medicine classes peppered throughout as well. And then some classes that are all about just specific herbs. You got a 2-hour class here on Chisandra, sumac, and rowan. So take your time to read through all of the classes that are included. You have one class here all about St. John's wort, 2 hours all on St. John's wort on so many different incredible things, 2 hours on rosemary. So there are an incredible amount of topics, as I mentioned, over 70 different classes. So even if you are enrolled in Herbs A to Z, and maybe you're new, or even if you've been enrolled for quite a while, you may not have covered all of the topics. So make sure you take the time to peruse and see what you may have missed, as they are all fantastic and thorough, as you well know. Of course, on the homepage, you've got the MWH Year 1 program. You can read all about it and find out all about it here. In the currently ongoing Herbs and the Female Reproductive System, it's a 6-class series. There are 2 live classes remaining, so you can join us if you like, or find out about the course by clicking here. And before too long, this class will no longer be available, so make sure you check it out while it's still up on the homepage. Herb Magic. This was on the Leap Day. And Matthew gave an amazing class on so many different topics relating to herb magic. It's a fun class, so many anecdotes and stories, and just a wonderful class. So yeah, check it out. You can click on this icon here and you'll be redirected to the recording. And if you are available on Friday evening, then you can show up to the Doctrine of Signatures Walnut is the herb of the month. But if you do miss that live class, you can always catch the recording for up to a week by clicking on this green icon here. Lastly, I'll mention the culinary remedies, exploring health in African American kitchens. You can save 50% and get this class with all the materials that are included. However, if you simply want to tune into the class, you can find it on YouTube, on our YouTube channel for free. And make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, as there's plenty of content coming out all the time, and great great content, short content, longer content. So make sure you subscribe so you get notified. Of course, we're back here in the webinar, and welcome once again. In case you're just coming in now, my name is Alberto Carbo with the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism. I'm here with Phyllis and Matthew, and tonight's Herbs A to Z is the rose family. We've got peach, rose, hawthorn, lady's mantle, and meadowsweet. As always, you have two ways to participate in tonight's webinar. You have the Q&A and the chat, and both of those icons you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You go ahead and open the chat. Make sure the little tab at the bottom of the chat window says everyone rather than hosts and panelists to ensure everybody can see your message, and let us know where you're joining from, as well as any anecdotes that come up throughout class. We absolutely love class participation, but for content related questions, place those in the Q&A. Simply click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and that way the questions will not get lost in the chat. Without further delay, I will hand it over to Matthew and Phyllis for the Rose family.
Yeah, Phyllis will be our leader tonight, our illustrious leader.
Okie dokie. So we're going to get started with the member of the Rose family. We're going to start with Rose, but I just kind of want to say that the rose family is probably one of the most important family of plants, just if we just think about for our food crops, not just for our medicines, but including our medicine too, because all of our stone fruits and many of our fruiting plants are actually in the rose family. So like strawberries and peaches, which we'll be talking about peach later. Plums, pears, and I do use plums, so I may mention plum a little later also.
Right.
Medicinally, yeah. Pears, apples, apricots, cherries, crab apples, almonds, quince, loquats, boysenberry, dewberry, loganberry, nectarines, serviceberry, blackberry, and raspberry. And I may not have even named them all, but this is kind of like a really good kind of broad overview of how important the rose family is to our fruits, our common fruits. And these are, I think, especially important because most of these we're able to cultivate and grow in our gardens. They may have been wild at one point in time, but definitely cultivatable. And then for the plants, medicinal plants, agrimony and hawthorn, which we will be talking about tonight, wild cherry, which you may mention, but I know there's a class with wild cherry. We will be talking about meadowsweet. Also, cinquefoil is in that family, and lady's mantle, which we will be talking about lady's mantle. So tonight we're going to concentrate on rose, peach, hawthorn, and lady's mantle, meadowsweet as the main herbs.
Mhm.
But there may be mention of other members of the rose family here and there.
Mhm.
So did you want to say something before I launch into roses?
Well, they are distinct for their 5 flowers, and they all have that, or else they've been modified in some odd way.
5
And
flowers or 5 petals?
petals,
Leaves. Yeah.
flower, yeah. And there's probably, I don't know, 3,000 kinds of roses, so there must be.
Huge number. I mean, there were so many, I just kind of got lost in trying to think about them.
Yeah,
I,
over 2,000 members of the family. So, and then of course there's some variation. I mean, like there's 5,000 roses, there's probably 5,000 varieties of apples and counting. So it's
yes.
extremely diverse. And apple and hawthorn still cross-pollinate, so there's a kinship there, but most of them are separated out. And yeah, so enormous family, many medicinals, partly because they're so safe. I can't think of any
Yeah.
toxic. Yeah, I don't think there's any toxic member of the family.
I didn't run across any that I was aware of, and definitely none in my research. I didn't run across any. I mean, you can always do too much of a good thing. But that's more like I overdid it rather than toxicity.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Prick
Oh,
your finger.
I ate too much apple pie. Yeah,
Yeah.
pricked your
Hey,
finger. Right. So
okay. Well, let's start with Rose, as you suggested, and you can start out
okay.
there.
So I think there is no other plant that is associated with um, spirituality, love, and romance more so than the rose. It has not only physical attributes that are widely known about it, but it also has, emotional and spiritual attributes that have become widely known also. And the language of flowers, and if you're not familiar with the language of flowers, and especially England and parts of Europe at a certain time period, almost everybody was very familiar with the language of flowers, so that if someone sent you a flower, that was the message, and if you knew the flower, you knew what the message was, which I've always found fascinating, and have often studied it over the years. But in the language of flowers, roses um, are signify um, a willingness to get to know the person or a romantic inclination. But even more than that, each color of rose had a different meaning. So it depended on what color of rose you might send to someone. So red had the most association with romance and et cetera, et cetera. So it's just kind of like a fascinating way to look at the language of plants. So red is the lover's rose, signifying like passion. White was humility and innocence, and yellow expressed friendship and joy. So if somebody got yellow roses, it was like, do you want to be friends? If they got a red rose, it was like, this would be really fun to get to know you on a romantic level. So, do you have your language of rose of plant
Well,
book?
yeah, this is probably the best novel I've ever read in my life, The Language of Flowers by Vanessa Diefenbach, which is set right here in San Francisco, where I happen to be today. And yeah, and in the she has different. Well, she part of the plot of the book is in fact different kinds of um that sometimes there's different meanings to the rose, and she has a whole list here. Let's see. Um, Burgundy rose, unconscious beauty. Huh.
Okay.
So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Um, Orange rose, fascination.
Hmm. I can
Pale,
see that.
pale peach rose, modesty.
Mm.
Pink rose, grace. Purple rose, enchantment. Yeah, that's kind of the witch color.
Yeah.
Red rose, love. White rose, a heart unacquainted with love, which is part of the plot of the book. And yellow rose, infidelity. Um,
Ooh.
yeah, and that's part of the plot of the book because it has different meanings in different flower books that they happen to, and it kind of they in the previous generation there's been an estrangement and they don't really understand it until they understand that
Yeah.
meaning.
I think the language of flowers and the meaning for each plant was really popular in the 1800s and into the early to mid 1900s. And it may still be popular in parts of the world. But I think it kind of reached a heyday and
Yeah,
during that time period.
that
Um,
actually in San Francisco in the probably 2000s or so. It's fairly recent. So, but in the book there, I mean, uh, the protagonist gets a message with the flower. It's the first time she's ever had a message from anybody other than her stepmother at one point, 10 years previous. It was like somebody, it sends her a conscious. And yeah, so
Ooh, dubious. I'm gonna have to check that out. Sounds like a fun read.
it's a great book. Yeah, right. Yeah, so well, we generally use I don't know where all those colors come from, but we generally use the wild rose, of which there's probably 2,000 different varieties or 3,000.
Well, in the United States, we have 20 native species of wild rose. So the areas with the most different natural species, of course, the roses from the Mediterranean and China. This was the big area
Yeah.
of their birth, so to speak. And actually, the Crusaders in the Middle East are during the Crusades, they're credited with taking the rose back to Northern Europe and England.
You mean
And
the beautiful rose, the Persian rose, yeah.
yeah,
Because
um,
there were already roses everywhere. Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
And I think from that, then you had tea roses and all these other cultivars kind of came out of that. And also, Alexander the Great is kind of credited with spreading roses around on his travels also. That
oh,
and some other plants. He was really good about spreading plants around. The interestingly, to the Greeks, a little history here. To the Greeks, the rose symbolized secrecy
oh,
and silence and love. It was
hmm,
love was in there, but also secrecy and silence. So it's kind of like love you didn't want to know anybody to know about in a way, or unrequited love, maybe. And so the Romans associated that rose with, of course, love, but also beauty and passion and purity. And that's kind of like, what stuck in, kind of moved, everybody became more familiar with those. And in traditional Chinese medicine in China, from which, is also the home of the rose, the rose is believed to lift the qi,
hmm,
to build and lift the chi. And in Ayurveda, the rose is considered a really cooling and balancing to pitta.
yeah.
And, some of my kind of uses of rose petals I learned from um, just home remedies from the local population, the Hindu population in Huntsville, just some local remedies because they use it a lot in their cooking. So that's where I learned to put rose petals in my spaghetti sauce
Oh,
to take away the acute acidity and not have to add sugar. And it works really well. Just a few dried rose petals
hmm,
in your spaghetti sauce is wonderful. It just takes the bite out of the really acidic tomatoes and makes it a little easier on the tummy and easier to digest. And of course, rose petal is famous for the complexion and rose water. So it's like rose has an affinity for the skin and supportive of the skin. So all parts of the rose are safe and medicinal. The flowers and the petals are most commonly used as medicine, but you can use the leaves and you can use the roots. And I have used the roots. I've really never been a fan of using the leaves because they can have a little tiny bit of sticker sharpness around them. It's so, but I have used the root. And of course, there's the hips. So, which the rose hips are acidic. Rose petals and root are alkaline. Leaves are alkaline. but the hips are acidic and a really good source of the whole vitamin C complex. One of the best sources of vitamin C, not just ascorbic acid, but the whole bioflavonoid complex that is vitamin C is found in the rose hips. So,
And that's why many rose vitamin C supplements have 10% rose hips, which is good.
now,
Because
go ahead.
because vitamin C is often just ascorbic acid, which is like 1% of the actual molecules in vitamin C. So that's nice that you're getting a lot more. But ascorbic acid has a lot of properties too. So
I did a little research on kind of the best method to imbibe rose hips to have the most vitamin C. And actually, the tincture came out kind of on top. If you dry the rose hips and grind it up, you're going to lose some of the vitamin C because it's susceptible to heat and drying, so you'll lose some of the drying. But when I was like investigating, the alcohol did not degrade the vitamin C nor the bioflavonoids. So you got more from a tincture than you did from drying the rose hips and or from making rose hip jam, which is something I've made in the past because just heating it dissipates a lot of the vitamin C.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and rose hips have that nice little acidic bite to them. Whether you use them as a tea or you put them in a tincture, it's a little sharp, but not too sharp. So I like them. I like the taste of rose hips. Rose hips come onto the plant after it's bloomed and after the leaves are beginning to fall. And rose hips can be very small, which is what you'll find on some of the wild roses. Some of the more domesticated roses, they can be like pretty big and kind of look like a hawthorn in a way. And they can range in color from like orange to red to like a burgundy or brownish red. So any of those would be useful. I learned a couple of years ago when there was a bumper crop of rose hips on all the roses that not to wait too long to pick them because I kept waiting like, are they ready yet? Are they ready yet? And so I didn't pick them. And then all of a sudden, when I went to pick them, they were like shriveling up and they were past their prime. And I was like, okay, next time I'm going to get them right when I think they're ready, not wait a week or two to see if they really were ready. So just a note of caution, go ahead and get them. If they've changed color, they're pretty much ready to gather. And the frost just takes them away. So you got to definitely get them before frost. Right. So that's the hips. But let's talk about the petals, which is the most commonly used part of the plant for medicine, as a remedy. I'm sorry, as a remedy. Very alkalizing. The petals are very alkalizing, and a tea of rose petals is really soothing to the stomach and will relieve acid indigestion. Really useful for acid reflux, ulcers, and just extend that on to any kind of irritation in the bladder also. Because a bladder needs more alkalinity to heal, and roses will provide that. So you can use that as a tea or a tincture. But I found that soothing properties, which to me, rose petals have a bit of a soapy aftertaste. I don't know. Have you noticed that little soapy aftertaste? Not?
No.
Huh. Yeah. And I've wondered what that was, if that was some sort of saponin, is what I'm assuming. But yeah, no, and so I don't like a lot of rose petals, but just enough to have that kind of soothing taste. And also, besides the alkaline properties, there's a tiny bit of mucilaginous in the petals if you make a little warm water tea. So it's very soothing on an irritated throat. It would probably be really good in a cough formula. Yeah, kind of soothing that irritated throat kind of thing. Um,
We'll use wild cherry for that.
yeah,
Mhm.
okay. Also because of the soapiness, rose petal can have a slight laxative effect.
Hmm.
It's more like a lubricant to the bowels, but they also initiate bile release at the same time. So, it also has an effect on the liver and the gallbladder. So,
Hmm.
rose is one of those herbs that there's really not a body system almost that it doesn't touch or affect in some way. It has some nervine properties and has traditionally been used for people who are having seizures as an anticonvulsant. It is, yeah, I'm sorry.
You're talking about the petal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The petals are antispasmodic. So I think of rose as a nervine, rose petals as a nervine. To a great extent, just because it has that relaxing, alkalizing, help you move into parasympathetic activity mode. Anytime bile is initiated out of the gallbladder, there's a greater tendency for the body to be in parasympathetic because that's what the gallbladder likes, to be able to release the bile. It has it uplifts the spirit, so it had some antidepressant type activity that, as the Chinese say, would lift the qi, which would give a feeling of more energy and upliftedness. It helps reduce anxiety. So you can see it is truly, the petals have this nervine type activity or effect on the nervous system. And it can also help relieve pain, especially in the stomach and in the gut. There are nerve factors, I guess that's the word I'm looking for, in rose petals that are similar to the ones in lion's mane. The activity is similar to the ones in lion's mane, so it can help repair damaged nerves and help improve memory, and help kind of get rid of brain fog, and help increase concentration and diminish dementia, for example. So, could be very useful in neuromuscular disorders. I haven't personally used them for that, but I'm thinking, with all these with all these properties or these activities related to the nervous system, would be in calming and relaxing, moving into parasympathetic. I'm certainly going to look at it for as an addition to like a Parkinson formula or something where everything just needs to settle down, or an MS formula. Or just in there with the formula, because it just feels like it just would just fit in there really, really well. It's healing on the skin. Rose petal, like a wash, is healing on the skin. It is, and the Middle East, it was used to help heal uterine infections.
Hmm.
So it must have an action on mucous membrane tissues. And I'd not thought about that before. And I was investigating. I was like, wow. So I'm certainly going to, I wonder if it would be useful for vaginal infections, if it's useful for
Yeah.
uterine infections.
Remember, last night I mentioned hibiscus
Yeah.
flower for vaginal infection with just a lot of heat and pain, whatever the origin of that. And rose, I would have thought, well, I'm not sure if they meant rose petal or rose hips, because either one.
Well, they specifically said rose petal.
Okay, so they are sometimes combined or used analogically. The rose petal, I guess it is, and the hibiscus flower. Yeah.
Yeah, the rose petal would kind of reduce some of the sharp bite of the hibiscus flower, just
Good.
alkalinity acid kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, And it's also used for ovarian cyst. So this in the Middle East, this was considered kind of like a big women's remedy.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, that sure does. Well, like on the not just the emotional level, but the physical level. So I've used the root for coughs, colds, flu, lung problems. I haven't used the petals for that, but definitely have used the root for that. And it works really well. It's usually in a formula with something else, and I tend to use my wild rose that I have growing way back in the back against the woods is what we call the Cherokee rose, which is actually the Carolina rose, the wild Carolina rose. It has that very simple 4 petal flower. It's not multiflora, where it's a very complex flower. No, this is a very simple one. And it ranges from pale pink to super bright pink.
Mm.
It's very pretty. It's like so pretty you don't want to dig it up. you know, you're like, I don't want to dig this root up. This is too cute. So rose oil is very highly valued in the marketplace and very expensive.
For a gram or so. Yeah.
And it takes like I once somebody can look it up, but it takes like so many tons of rose petals or rose flowers to make just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of oil, which is why it's so expensive. And right now it's like Bulgaria, and I guess it used to be the part of the Ukraine, but that area right there was considered kind of like prime rose. It was like a major industry growing roses for the oil in the marketplace. So yeah. So the oil is antimicrobial. It supports the skin. It improves the complexion. It gets rid of like little red spots on the skin and can help heal up sun damage to the skin. So it's really sought after in the cosmetic industry. Right.
Oh yeah, there's also rose seed oil, which isn't nearly as expensive, but which is a very good skin remedy.
Yeah, it's a good skin remedy too. And you're right, it is less expensive. And that's the one I tend to use because I'd get that and make up my little formula of oil. But yeah.
5% as expensive as the other one. I mean, probably $50 versus 500.
Yeah, it's amazing how this is a plant that has I want to say kind of kept the same uses to a great extent. When you see a plant like that, like garlic is another plant that, for 5,000 years of recorded plant history, we know it's been used for pretty much the same thing and it's still working really, really well, right? We still use it for the same thing. And the same with rose. Rose is one of those plants that have like 5,000 years of written history around its use, and it's still just as useful today as it was then. We have just kind of like gone toward the more kind of emotional, spiritual, open the heart is very popular, I think, among herbalists to add rose to heart formulas to open the heart, to expand a person's heart, to help them reduce the effects of trauma. So it's a plant that we almost use like a Bach flower remedy in a way. Also kind of in modern herbalism. So it's definitely a mind, body, spirit plant. Can't think of another one off the top of my head that we use kind of like full gauntlet the same way. Right. You have anything to add in there? Because
Lots, yeah.
yeah.
Well, I use the rose hips more. In fact, I haven't used the petals. I've used the rose hips, and they are cooling and astringent or drying. So they are well indicated when the tongue is red and moist, would be one indication. And the only other remedy that I think of when I see a bit, just the tongue is really red and moist, maybe muscular too, kind of the pitta tongue, is linden flower. And I don't actually understand why linden flower work when it's not really drying, it's actually mucilaginous. But there's probably some reason for that.
Hmm.
But but at any rate, that tongue would indicate one of those two plants for me for starts, or if they didn't seem to work, then I'd want to turn to something else. But so that's one indication. So that means heat, all sorts of heat conditions. But then for this whole family, I look at the palm. My palm doesn't have this, but so when it's
Does
red,
mine?
yes, well, a little bit actually, although you don't have it, the redness over here particularly. Yeah, you have redness up here, but you have it kind of moderate. Yeah, hold it up just a bit more. Yeah, well, that's enough. Okay, so you have it slightly, no, you have it definitely enough to actually be an example. That's about 1/4 of the way to where you get concerned. And but it means that, yeah, it's a good indicator for the rose family. For rose hips, probably rose petals. For rose hips, hawthorn, or wild cherry. And they all have redness in those areas. And the wild cherry has redness and yellow, which is interesting because it taught me that from that it is a liver gallbladder remedy, which I just
Yeah.
never have guessed. And I mean, every time, yeah, yours is more pale than yellow. There might be a
Mm.
little bit of yellow in there, but not it's more pale. Let's see that one. You might have had your hand down or something on something. Let's see the other hand. Oh, uh, huh. Yeah. Okay. No.
Because can resist.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it turned a little red. I think you were pressing down in
Yeah, I
between.
was pressing down. I'd been
Yeah.
writing and had my hand on the table, but
Yeah.
I think people could kind of get the gist.
Yeah.
Oh,
So, so yeah, that's not yellow. Or I mean faintly yellow, but not enough that I would think of wild cherry. And I have not been disappointed in that particular indication. To give an example, so one time I met a family at Present Moment Herbs there. They came in, I came in especially, they did too, and their 8, 9-year-old daughter, they just had a beautiful little daughter. She had cancer of the liver.
oh,
Yeah, already 70% of the liver was cancerous. And they were bringing her back from the Mayo Clinic, and they stopped at Present Moment. The aunt was the one behind it. She was more into alternative medicine. And uh she looked real tired. I saw that on her hand. I thought, oh, wild cherry. I gave her wild cherry and something else. I don't know, maybe who knows? It would have been a good idea to maybe give her dandelion root or dandelion milk thistle, whatever your standard liver remedies. But it was interesting. So the Mayo Clinic, they got back to the oh, so she had not been able to eat for a couple days, and she ate on the way home. And the Mayo Clinic got back to her and they said, yeah, okay, they had a therapy, chemotherapy worked out, and they started out on that. And they said, don't take any herbs, but they found that she couldn't eat without taking the wild cherry, so they had to sneak that in. They didn't tell the doctors. And actually, today I'd probably say, well, no, you couldn't really have her take wild cherry liqueur, but some sort of, you could maybe consider cherry to be a food. You don't want a candy cherry or something.
right.
Well, yeah, so I mean, you probably have frozen Bing cherries or something like that. But but I didn't know in those days that it was interchangeable. But that she couldn't keep going without that. Well, it turned out so they'd only tried this chemotherapy on 8 people, and she was the first that it worked on. They were surprised. They said, no, no herbs. It's like the gall. And then when they re-examined her a month later, it's like, oh my God, it's working. It's like, yeah, you guys don't get it.
And that's exactly why they don't want any herbs, not because they think they might help.
Yeah,
It's because they can go, this
yeah,
drug did this, and there were no other influences,
yeah, I
right?
know. That's why they
Yeah.
want to And the family should have really volunteered that. And then what would they do? They'd have to discard that as a case history. They can't really stop her from taking it because she couldn't eat without it.
Or they could have said, if you're going to do herbs, you don't get chemo. Sometimes they will do that in trials. If it's a new drug in a trial, they're like, no, you can't do that and be in the trial.
Well, this was kind of pre-trial, I think. I mean, this was really just like experimental. And one thing I remembered, I asked, I just couldn't figure out how she had liver cancer at that age. I said, do you guys live near a chemical plant by any chance? He said, well, yeah, 2 blocks away. It's like,
Wow.
oh, God. So, so I felt on top of it. I don't know what happened with that case. I was afraid to ask. The aunt just filled me in, a month and a half later on the whole thing with the Mayo Clinic. So, I hope she survived that. But yeah. So, those doctors, and I mean, you want to work with the doctors, and whoever heard, no one's ever used wild cherry to fight cancer. So it's not like it's doing that part of the job. The
But
chemo
it's